Every evening, John Garrett stood at the fence, staring at the dying light bleeding across the plains. 3 years had passed since he buried his wife on the hill beyond the pasture, and yet her presence clung to every wind-swept shadow. When hoofbeats shattered the dusk, he didn't turn at first. Mrs. Henderson again, dragging another poor girl out to his ranch like a sacrifice to his silence. "This is my niece, Sarah," she announced. "A fine cook and a good wife." He tipped his hat, offered one word, "Ma'am." Sarah smiled nervously, but it faded against his stillness. Mrs. Henderson's face hardened. "You can't winter alone forever, Mr. Garrett." He met her gaze. "I've done it before." When they rode away, he turned back to the fence, his hand brushing the ring he still wore. The wind carried his wife's name. He whispered back, "I'm not ready." The first snow fell as John entered the county trading post. 3 years of solitude wrapped around him like armor. Behind him, voices carried, "He still wears the ring," Mrs. Henderson said, too loud for decency. 3 years is long enough to grieve. He ignored her, loading his cart with flour, salt, and lamp oil. Widow Baker offered him a steaming pie, kindness in her eyes. "You needn't be alone forever, John." He declined softly, guilt tightening his chest. At the counter, a new rumor stirred the air. "Dawson woman," the shopkeeper said. "Divorced. Moved into the old Mercer place. Alone?" Someone scoffed. Asking for trouble. John didn't care until he saw her. A lone figure chopping wood in men's clothes, unflinching in the cold. Smoke rose from her chimney, defiant and steady. He told himself it was nothing. Yet when he rode home, he looked back once and kept thinking of her. At sunrise, she was there standing at his fence with a broken wagon axle. "Need this welded," she said, calm as the dawn. "Can pay or trade labor." John studied her. Mid-30s maybe, weathered hands, sharp eyes. "I'll fix it." They worked in silence, no idle chatter. When done, she tested the weld with a craftsman's eye. "It'll hold." He refused payment. "First one's free." She offered her hand. Clara Dawson, John Garrett. Her grip was strong, equal, not timid. She watched him, unflinching. "They say you turn down every woman in the county. That's my business." Then I'll ask plain, do you want a wife or another winter alone? He froze. Her words struck something deep, buried. "I'm not asking for love," she added, voice steady. "Just asking if you plan to survive." When she walked away, he stood rooted in the snow, heart suddenly, painfully awake. 3 days later, she returned with a folded paper, her proposal. "We marry before winter," Clara said. "Come spring, if it fails, we part." Practical, not romantic. "Why me?" John asked. "Because you're the only man who won't expect gratitude." Her honesty cut sharper than any blade. She listed her reasons: protection from creditors, from gossip, from the men who saw her as prey. "And you?" she asked. "What do you get?" "Company," he said quietly. "Maybe a reason to keep the fire lit." Clara's eyes softened. "Then we have a deal." They signed the papers 2 days later. No vows, no kiss, just ink and necessity. She moved into his wife's old room, dust thick with memories. That night, the wind howled through the hills like an omen. He sat by the fire staring at her empty chair, wondering if he'd just saved himself or damned them both. The storm arrived like judgment, twine screaming, snow burying the cabin by dusk. Smoke backed up in Clara's room. "Chimneys blocked," John said. "Sleep by the stove, you take your bed," she countered. "Neither one." They both sat by the fireplace, strangers warmed by shared survival. The blizzard roared for days, sealing them inside a world of white silence. Clara worked steadily, calm as an old soldier, mending, cooking, keeping him alive in more ways than one. When the fire dimmed, he saw her watching him. "You all right?" she asked. "Fine," a lie. They didn't speak again, but something shifted in the quiet. By the third night, the storm's fury became a strange kind of peace. He'd forgotten what it was to share silence with someone who didn't demand to fill it. Outside, the world froze solid. Inside, something began to thaw. When he came in from the barn, she was kneeling by the old trunk, his wife's things spread open in her hands. "I'm sorry," Clara said. "I was looking for blankets." "It's fine," he lied. "The letters, the photograph, the hairbrush every piece of the life he'd lost. She was beautiful, Clara murmured. She was, that night, by the fire. She told him her own story of a husband who left, of a town that blamed her. They said I wasn't enough. They were wrong, John said. She met his eyes. And you think staying alone is penance? He hesitated. Maybe, then you're punishing the wrong person. The words struck deep. When she rose to add wood to the fire, he found himself watching her, not the ghost of his wife, but the woman who refused to let the fire die. He didn't sleep that night. The storm passed, but the whispers didn't. When they walked into church together, the congregation fell silent. Mrs. Henderson's eyes gleamed with venom. The preacher spoke of hasty unions and godly judgment, his words dripping poison. Clara sat still, hands trembling in her lap. Without thinking, John placed his hand over hers, steady, grounding. Gasps rippled through the pews. After the sermon, Mrs. Henderson blocked their way. Quick marriage for a desperate man, she sneered. Must be nice. John's voice turned steel. My wife, my choice. She blinked. We know what kind of woman. You know nothing. He cut in, low and final. And you'll say nothing. The crowd froze. He offered Clara his arm. We're done here, on the wagon ride home. She finally whispered. You didn't have to defend me. Yes, I did. Her reply was quiet. Then thank you. And for the first time, she smiled. Spring thawed more than the land. The ice between them melted slowly through shared chores, quiet meals, and stolen glances. Clara planted a garden. He built a porch wide enough for 2 chairs. One morning, she asked, do you still want me gone come spring? He hesitated. No, I want you to stay. Why? Because you see me. The grief, the scars, and you stay. She stepped close, firelight flickering in her eyes. I'm not asking you to stop loving her, she said softly. I'm asking if there's room for something new. He thought of the ring he'd finally removed, the grave he hadn't visited in months. There's room, he said. When he kissed her, it wasn't passion, it was peace, the kind that comes after storms. She smiled against his lips. We're going to be all right. For the first time in years, he believed her. They climbed the hill together at sunset, wildflowers in Clara's hands. The cross stood weathered but unbroken. I'm sorry I took so long, John said to the grave. I tried to follow you instead of living. His voice cracked. But I've got someone now. Someone brave as you were. Clara laid the flowers down gently. She doesn't replace you, John continued, tears falling freely. But she's teaching me to live again, to laugh again. I think you'd like her. The wind sighed across the prairie like a blessing. He looked at Clara, her face wet, her eyes kind. Thank you, he said, for staying. She smiled faintly. Thank you for letting me. Hand in hand, they walked down the hill. Behind them, the cross stood steady, the flowers bending gently in the wind. He no longer felt haunted, only watched over. Spring returned in full bloom, green sweeping the plains, wildflowers blazing under open sky. The ranch breathed again, fences mended, roof fixed, earth alive. Town thawed to smiles replacing whispers. They worked side by side, laughter finally easy. One evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun set fire to the horizon. Think we'll make it? Clara asked quietly. John looked at her, at the home they'd built from ruin. We already did, he said. Their hands found each other's, fitting like they'd always belonged there. Later, under a blanket of stars, they visited the grave one last time. Fresh flowers glowed pale in the moonlight. He felt no guilt now, only gratitude. Ready? Clara asked. He nodded. Together, they walked toward the cabin glowing warm against the night. 2 silhouettes on the endless prairie, proof that even grief, given time and grace, can bloom again. Don't miss another story of love, loss, and redemption. Subscribe now to Tales of Wild West.